Welcome everybody to part 2 of tonight's event of the Opportunity Zones Meetup. Tonight we're going to be talking about investor profiling. This is a very important aspect of raising capital, and opportunity zones have their own nuances about who and why somebody may be interested in an opportunity zone investment. It's part of a capital campaign process that I'm currently developing, and what we're going to put into a 10-week boot camp coming up starting next month. And that'll be a 10-part, 4-hour each, 40 total hour program that we'll video record. And then this will become available for sale for people who would like to either attend in person or to watch the video online at their own timeline. This is a process that I currently use in my capital campaigns, which we're using with a number of different larger programs because it's very methodical. I joke that it's rational and reasonable as compared with other approaches which are dependent upon serendipity or magic or both in order to be successful. So in this particular process, this is broken into 10 stages. You can't read this from the audience right now, but you'll be able to see it and read it online. As is our practice, upon completing any particular program, we'll post the slide deck up online, distribute it to all members of this meetup group, and then it will also be available within the video that'll be distributed within about 10 days after the event. But we start here with a capital assessment, and our last event, we actually went through the first 3 steps of this process. Capital assessment, determining what you need to hit your milestones in every form of capital. We then determined whether or not there were any capital sources available that could provide the needed capital. And then we set capital goals, which represent minimum and maximum based upon hitting a particular milestone and having enough cash to both do the next capital raise if one is needed, and to address fallbacks or pivots that might be required because things didn't turn out the way it was planned. Tonight we're going to profile capital sources or profile investors. So we're building upon some of the work that we talked about at our last event, but diving deep into this particular topic because it's ultimately the one everybody asks. People go all the time, well, who's going to write me a check? And that's based upon the ability to answer this question accurately. And if you don't do the other things, then the answer may be, I don't know, which is very common. And unfortunately, I don't know doesn't allow for any efficiency in raising capital. So in moving beyond this, once we define who we're going to raise money from, we'll develop a strategy that's focused on one or more, and typically today in a capital stack, you're talking 2, 3 or more types of capital that you may need to raise money from concurrently in order to get enough capital of all types you need in order to get something done. From there, we go to structure the offering, what you're going to give up as a business in order to get the capital you need. This may be stock where you're sharing future profits. It may be revenue, you're sharing future sales earnings. It may be something more exotic, or it may be just simple promissory note or convertible note that you're getting into. But it's designed based upon who you know you're going to talk to about investment. So it can be custom fitted even down to individual deals on individual offerings rather than being a shotgun one-size-fits-all approach. Then we developed a capital campaign. This is part of your business plan that's dedicated to raising capital, where we allocate all the tasks that are needed to successfully raise money to different people. We put in a budget and a timetable, and we then have a pretty good idea of what our cost is going to be to raise money in addition to the price of whatever money or capital we're going to raise. We create the communications, which are offering documents and pitch documents, slide decks. We create the channels for delivery to the people we're going to talk to, and then this whole thing is a management process from A to Z, where we're trying to implement best project management practices to assure that everything is done, that it moves forward smoothly through this as a process. And this results in a much, much higher success rate because you know who to talk to, why they're going to talk to you, what you need to tell them, how you go about telling them, and it's all done in a planned fashion rather than standing in front of a room and say, I need money, give me money, I can't tell you why or what I'm going to spend it on, but it's a good thing, so give me money, which tends to be a short synopsis of most pitches at most of the pitch competitions. We want to have something that's very professional, something that conveys automatically credibility to the people that you're talking to. We're going to be working with things that enhance your credibility when you don't know the person with the capital, because that relationship is essential to making an investment decision. And then we give all the details, all the information they need to make a very informed and very good decision to make an investment. So as we talked about again, first steps in this 10-step process is an assessment of capital needs. Every business is different. During their reaching their goals, they're going to have different milestones, and we want to know what kind of capital, whether we're talking about cash, we're talking about people with different skill sets, buildings, equipment, all types of capital are there. And what we often find is that raising money is harder than raising any other form of capital. We can go directly to an equipment supplier and they may give us a lease, where if we tried to raise the money from an angel and then spend that on buying the equipment, we've made this a longer, more costly, and potentially an undoable type of capital raise. So we need to know what we're going to need. We're going to put that into lists. We're going to describe it like baking a cake, or I'm now calling it baking a business. And the ingredients are all the elements of success that are necessary to achieve the goals of that particular business. From there, we go on to determine if there are sources of capital for each type of capital. So instead of assuming that it's all in cash, we're going to go to a bank or an angel to get all the things we need, we're going to break this down to see if there's anyone else who has these assets that we can get directly from them without going through the more formal, more extended cash raising process. We want to verify that that capital is readily available. If it's not, then there may be something wrong with the plan. It may be impossible to raise the capital, and we want to know that early on rather than chasing something that doesn't exist. So that brings us then to setting the capital goals. We determine what milestone we're working for. It might be becoming profitable, first sale, opening an office, completing the first product. Could be anything that's within the business plan, but it's a definable goal that everybody can relate to. And then we're going to say what assets we need to get to those goals. We're going to pick the minimum goal that we're comfortable is not a stretch goal, not too far down the road. Not something that represents a major change in position that would require adjusting price or risk in our project. And from there, we're going to determine that that's what we're going to set the goal for the campaign. That becomes the outcome of success that goes into the plan. It goes into all the documents that communicate the offering, and everybody understands that if they jump on board by providing these resources, they're helping move this business towards these particular outcomes. So that brings us then to profiling investors. And we were in a conversation with an economic development agency the last couple of weeks, and we were trying to explain the difference between a thoughtful, methodical approach to raising capital from people who have an interest or motivation to support that capital campaign and those people who don't. And this kind of reflects that fact that if I know who cares about me, and I know who has the resources, and I have something that they want from me, we're going to strike a deal, and I don't have to talk to that many people. It's quite possible that a complete capital campaign can be carried out by talking to no more than 20 particular capital sources. And they can be identified in advance. They'll understand why they're being talked to. You don't have to necessarily educate them on the industry or get them up to speed. And your ability to communicate at this level also builds your credibility in the conversation. Without this in place, this 20 might become 200 or 2,000 because you're saying, I'm going to talk to anybody who has capital, whether they care about me or not, they're ready to employ it in a high-risk venture or not, and you just keep talking to people in hopes that somehow, if you talk to enough people in the numbers game, somebody's going to fall out of that, and they will. But the question is, do you have 3 months, a year, 2 years to be out raising capital, looking for someone who you don't know what they look like, you don't know why they're going to give you the resources you need, instead of attending to your business. So the profiling becomes very, very important. It's like defining the center of the target, not the target, knowing that those in the center of the target are the most likely to give you the resources you need, and that will then dictate your entire capital campaign. It is highly focused, it is very straightforward, and we know who we're talking to and why we're talking to them. So why profile? It seems like an odd question to ask at this point, but the common style is for someone to say, I need high-risk money. They will still go to the bank first and say, would you give me a loan? And since the Great Recession, banks have been regulated to a point where they're not allowed to make loans that have risk associated with it. So where before, when I was growing up, we might have gone to the local banker and we'd had a good conversation over coffee, and they might have stretched themselves a little bit and made me a loan with risk attached to it. That's history now. If you go to a bank today and there's any risk at all in the proposition, they're going to tell you no, because they're told by regulators they need to protect the deposits, which are under their control, and that makes that the regular bank is out of the picture. Well, then knowing that they're high risk, apparently because banks won't loan to them, they go to the angel investors who have a higher risk tolerance. But the problem is that angels want a higher rate of return on their money. It's only rational that if they're putting their money to work and they're looking to make money on their money, they would want people to pay them the highest potential rates that are available. And here we run into a second problem, in that most businesses don't make enough money, don't have enough growth or profits that they can afford to give up a high rate of return. And this is an area we've run into in the opportunity zones in particular. When you go out and talk to funds, they will commonly tell you they want 12, 13, 14, 15% annual rate of return on their investment. Well, if a business is only growing at the national average of 7.5%, there's nowhere in this structure that they're going to meet the qualifications for an opportunity zone investor on a straight ROI basis. And what we're having problems with is that there are deals that will generate that rate of return. But the businesses who are now seeking to raise money through Opportunity Zone, even with the tax incentive, still do not favorably compare and compete for that money, and therefore they remain unfunded. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find that person who is willing to invest in a business at that time in the manner in which the business exists. That doesn't mean there's a guarantee that there's an investor out there, but we want to spend our time talking to that person rather than everybody else who clearly will never make an investment in this particular project because that's a waste of time. Might make for a great social event, but it's not good for moving the business forward. So we're trying to zero in to the center of the target, trying to zero in on those who care most. So we're going to take another break here, and we're going to dive into the details of profiling and walk you through this and give you some examples so you can see this, and again refer to several different opportunity zone scenarios where they may apply. And that will be our program for the evening. So we'll see you again in 5 minutes.